The champagne fountains sparkled under crystal chandeliers as Manhattan's elite mingled in the Grand Ballroom of the Plaza Hotel. Sophia Chen stood near the dessert table, one hand resting protectively on her 7-month belly, watching her husband Marcus Hayes work the room with practiced charm. At 32, Marcus had built Hayes Capital Management into a billion-dollar empire through a combination of ruthless intelligence and carefully cultivated connections. Tonight's gala was his coronation, the moment when old money finally acknowledged that Marcus Hayes belonged among them. Sophia adjusted the strap of her emerald gown, custom designed to accommodate her pregnancy while maintaining the elegance Marcus demanded. She'd spent 3 hours getting ready, ensuring every detail was perfect because Marcus had made it clear, tonight was about appearances, about showing the world that Hayes Capital had arrived. "Mrs. Hayes, you look absolutely radiant." Margaret Whitmore, wife of a hedge fund titan, appeared at Sophia's elbow with a practiced smile. "What are you due?" 10 weeks. Sophia returned the smile automatically, years of political training kicking in. "We're having a daughter." "How wonderful." Marcus must be thrilled. Sophia's hand tightened on her water glass. Marcus hadn't been thrilled when she told him about the pregnancy 6 months ago. He'd been calculating, already working out how to leverage fatherhood into better optics for his business dealings. "He is," she lied smoothly. "We both are." Across the ballroom, Marcus was deep in conversation with Senator Richard Blake, his posture suggesting intimacy and influence. Sophia watched as her husband laughed at something the senator said, his hand gesturing expansively, diamond cufflinks catching the light. Those cufflinks had cost more than most people's monthly rent, purchased specifically for tonight. Her phone buzzed with a text from her father. "How are you feeling, sweetheart? Do you need me to pick you up early?" Judge Thomas Chen had been opposed to this marriage from the start, and the past 7 months had only deepened his concerns. But Sophia had been 25 and in love, convinced that Marcus's intensity was passion rather than obsession, that his controlling nature was protectiveness rather than possession. "I'm fine, Dad," she texted back. "I'll see you tomorrow for brunch." "Sophia." Marcus's voice cut through the crowd, sharp enough to make several heads turn. "Come here, please." She made her way through the crowd, her heels pinching feet that were swollen from standing too long. The baby kicked against her ribs as if sensing her tension. Marcus stood with Senator Blake and 3 other men Sophia recognized from Forbes lists and business journals. His smile was tight as he reached for her hand, his fingers squeezing harder than necessary. "Gentlemen, my beautiful wife, Sophia." Marcus pulled her close, his hand settling possessively on her lower back. "Isn't she glowing?" "Congratulations to you both," Senator Blake said warmly. "First child?" "Yes, Senator." Sophia felt Marcus's fingers dig into her back, a warning. She'd forgotten to mention that Senator Blake had daughters. Marcus had briefed her on everyone important tonight, expecting her to remember every detail. "We're blessed," Marcus said smoothly. "Though I keep telling Sophia she should be resting more. She insists on maintaining her work at the Children's Advocacy Center." The men chuckled indulgently, and Sophia felt heat crawl up her neck. Marcus made it sound like her work was a hobby, something she did to pass time rather than the career she'd built before their marriage. "The work is important," she said quietly. "Children need advocates." "Of course they do." Marcus's smile didn't reach his eyes. "But our daughter needs her mother healthy, doesn't she?" It was a dismissal wrapped in concern, and everyone heard it. Senator Blake and his companions politely excused themselves moments later, moving on to more interesting conversations. The moment they were out of earshot, Marcus's hand tightened painfully on Sophia's arm. "We need to talk." He steered her toward a quiet alcove near the service entrance, his grip bruising through the silk of her dress. Sophia's heart began to race, recognizing the signs of Marcus's temper rising. "What were you thinking?" His voice was low and controlled, the tone he used right before losing control completely. "Senator Blake has 3 daughters who all went to Yale. I told you this morning to mention your Yale connection if he brought up family. He didn't bring up, you made me look unprepared." Marcus released her arm only to step closer, his 6'3" frame looming over her. I spent 6 months setting up this introduction, and you couldn't remember one simple detail. Marcus, I'm sorry, I forgot, you forgot. His laugh was bitter. You forgot because you're too busy playing social worker to focus on what actually matters. This gala matters, Sophia. These connections matter. Your little advocacy center doesn't matter. The words hit like physical blows. Sophia had given up so much for this marriage, her own apartment, her independence, many of her friendships. But she'd kept her work at the center, the one thing Marcus hadn't been able to take from her. That's not fair, she said, her voice shaking. I work 60 hours a week helping children who have no one else. That matters, Marcus. What matters is not embarrassing me in front of people who control billion-dollar funds. His face was flushed now, the careful control slipping. What matters is remembering that you're Mrs. Marcus Hayes, and that comes with responsibilities. I am trying, you're failing. He grabbed her wrist, his grip painful enough to make her gasp. Look at you. You can barely walk in those heels. Your dress is wrinkled from sitting down when I specifically told you to remain standing. And you forgot the most basic information I gave you this morning. Sophia tried to pull away, but his grip only tightened. Marcus, you're hurting me. I'm hurting you? His voice climbed, drawing attention from nearby guests. Do you have any idea what you've cost me tonight? Senator Blake was ready to introduce me to his contacts at the Federal Reserve. That introduction could have been worth hundreds of millions. And you ruined it. I didn't ruin anything, the slap came without warning. Marcus's hand connected with her face hard enough to snap her head to the side, the sound echoing through the alcove like a gunshot. Sophia stumbled backward, her hand flying to her burning cheek, shock and pain radiating through her skull. The ballroom seemed to freeze. Conversations died mid-sentence. The string quartet playing Vivaldi faltered into silence. 300 of New York's wealthiest and most powerful people turned to stare at Marcus Hayes and his pregnant wife. Sophia tasted blood where her lip had split against her teeth. Her ears rang, and the baby kicked frantically inside her, as if trying to escape the violence. She looked at Marcus through tears of shock and pain, and saw something terrifying in his eyes. Not remorse. Not even anger anymore. Just cold calculation as he realized what he'd done in front of witnesses. Sophia, he reached for her, his expression shifting to concern so quickly it was almost believable. Sweetheart, I'm so sorry, I didn't mean, don't touch me. Her voice came out steady despite the trembling in her hands. Don't you ever touch me again. Security was already moving toward them, alerted by the sudden silence. Sophia saw Senator Blake's face, pale with shock and disapproval. She saw Margaret Whitmore whisper urgently into her phone. She saw every person in that ballroom register what had just happened. Marcus Hayes, billionaire darling of Wall Street, had just slapped his 7 months pregnant wife in front of Manhattan's elite. Mrs. Hayes, are you all right? A security guard appeared at her elbow, his hand hovering near her arm without touching. Do you need medical attention? I need my father. Sophia's voice shook now, adrenaline giving way to shock. Please call Judge Thomas Chen. Marcus's face drained of color. Sophia, don't be dramatic. Let's go home and talk about this privately. Privately? She laughed, the sound harsh and broken. You just assaulted me in front of 300 witnesses, Marcus. There's nothing private left. Another security guard had materialized, this one speaking quietly into his radio. Sophia caught the words assault, pregnant victim, and requesting police presence. You're overreacting. Marcus's tone had shifted to the one he used with difficult clients, soothing and patronizing. I barely touched you. Everyone knows pregnant women are emotional. We'll go home, you'll calm down, and we can discuss this rationally. The sheer audacity of his words cut through Sophia's shock. He was already constructing the narrative, already planning how to minimize and manipulate what had happened. Step away from Mrs. Hayes, sir. The security guard's voice was firm now. The police are on their way. The police? Marcus's laugh was forced. This is a private matter between me and my wife. There's no need for police involvement. Actually, Mr. Hayes, assault is a crime regardless of the relationship between the parties. A new voice cut through the tension, clear and authoritative. An assault of a pregnant woman carries enhanced charges in New York State. Sophia turned to see her father pushing through the crowd, his face a mask of controlled fury. Judge Thomas Chen had presided over Manhattan's criminal court for 20 years, and every ounce of that authority radiated from him now. Dad, Sophia's composure finally cracked, tears streaming down her face. Thomas Chen took in his daughter's split lip, her reddening cheek, her protective hand on her belly. Then he looked at Marcus Hayes with an expression that made the billionaire take an involuntary step backward. You have the right to remain silent, Thomas said quietly, though his voice carried through the silent ballroom. Though that's technically the police's line. They should be here any moment. Judge Chen, this is a misunderstanding. Marcus tried for reasonable, for persuasive. Sophia and I had a disagreement, emotions ran high, but there's no need for legal involvement. We're married. We can work this out privately. You struck my daughter. Thomas's voice never rose, but it cut like a blade. You struck my pregnant daughter in front of 300 witnesses. There is no working this out, Mr. Hayes. There is only the law. Sirens wailed outside, growing closer. Sophia watched Marcus's face cycle through calculations, trying to find an angle, a way to control the situation that was spiraling beyond his grasp. Sophia, please. He tried once more, his voice taking on a pleading quality she'd never heard before. Don't do this. Think about our daughter. Think about what this will do to our family. I am thinking about our daughter. Sophia's voice was steady now, strengthened by her father's presence and the certainty of what she had to do. I'm thinking that she deserves better than to grow up watching her father hit her mother. I'm thinking that she deserves better than to learn that violence is acceptable when someone doesn't behave the way you want them to. 4 NYPD officers entered the ballroom, and the scene that followed would dominate New York's social pages for months. Marcus Hayes, in his custom Tom Ford tuxedo, being read as Miranda rights. Photographs being taken of Sophia's injuries. Witness statements being collected from some of the most influential people in New York. Senator Blake was among the first to give a statement, his voice carrying clearly in the hushed ballroom. I saw Mr. Hayes strike Mrs. Hayes with sufficient force to cause her to stumble. She was clearly pregnant. The assault was unprovoked from what I observed. Margaret Whitmore's statement was equally damning. Mr. Hayes had been verbally berating Mrs. Hayes before the physical assault. I heard him tell her that her work didn't matter and that she'd embarrassed him. One by one, Manhattan's elite lined up to ensure Marcus Hayes faced consequences for what they'd witnessed. As the officers escorted Marcus toward the exit, he turned back one last time. This isn't over, Sophia. You're making a mistake. You'll regret this. The only mistake I made, she replied quietly, was marrying you in the first place. After Marcus was taken away, Thomas Chen wrapped his coat around his daughter's shoulders and guided her toward his car. The ballroom erupted in whispers behind them, but Sophia didn't look back. We need to get you to a hospital, Thomas said gently. Have you checked on the baby? She's moving normally. Sophia's hand hadn't left her belly since the assault. But yes, I should get checked out. In the car, Sophia finally allowed herself to break down, sobbing against her father's shoulder while he held her carefully, mindful of her belly. I'm so sorry, Dad, she whispered. You were right about him. You were right, and I didn't listen. Shoo, Thomas stroked her hair with gentle hands. We're not going to talk about that now. Right now, we're going to make sure you and the baby are safe. Everything else can wait. But Sophia knew everything else couldn't wait for long. Marcus Hayes had built his empire on his reputation for control and power. She'd just publicly stripped both from him in front of everyone who mattered in his world. The war had just begun. And Marcus Hayes had no idea that the quiet wife he'd underestimated had grown up watching one of Manhattan's toughest judges systematically dismantle the defenses of men who thought they were untouchable. The emergency room at Mount Sinai was quieter than Sophia expected at 11 o'clock on a Saturday night. Her father had called ahead, using his connections to ensure she'd be seen immediately by Dr. Patricia Walsh, the hospital's best high-risk OB. "Everything looks good," Dr. Walsh said after completing the ultrasound, her voice professionally reassuring. "Baby's heartbeat is strong, no signs of placental abruption or distress." "You were very lucky, Mrs. Hayes." Lucky. Sophia almost laughed at the word. Lucky that her husband's violence hadn't harmed their daughter. Lucky that he'd hit her face instead of her stomach. Lucky that 300 witnesses had been present to see it happen. "Thank you, Dr. Walsh," Thomas said from his position by the window, where he'd been making phone calls for the past hour. "What precautions should we take going forward?" Mrs. Hayes should avoid stressful situations as much as possible. Dr. Walsh glanced between them, clearly understanding the impossibility of that recommendation. "I'm going to recommend bed rest for the next 48 hours, just to be safe. After that, gentle activity is fine, but nothing strenuous." After Dr. Walsh left, Thomas returned to Sophia's bedside. His phone buzzed constantly with calls he was ignoring, but his attention remained focused on his daughter. "I've spoken with Rebecca Morrison," he said quietly. "She's willing to take your case." Sophia's eyebrows rose. Rebecca Morrison was Manhattan's most feared divorce attorney, known for extracting maximum settlements from wealthy men who underestimated their wives. "Dad, I can't afford Rebecca Morrison." "You don't need to. She's taking your case pro bono." Thomas's smile was grim. "Apparently she's been waiting years for a chance to take down Marcus Hayes. Something about him destroying a client's business to force a settlement in a previous divorce. Marcus was married before? Briefly, 10 years ago. The records are sealed, but Rebecca remembers." Thomas's phone buzzed again, and this time he glanced at it. "That's the district attorney's office. They want to meet with you Monday morning to discuss charges." Sophia felt exhaustion pulling at her. "What kind of charges?" "Assault in the second degree, to start. Because you're pregnant, it qualifies for enhanced charges. If the DA can prove Marcus intended to harm the baby, they might pursue assault in the first degree." "I don't want to hurt him," Sophia whispered. "I just want to keep our daughter safe." Thomas took her hand carefully, avoiding the bruises forming on her wrist. "Sweetheart, Marcus hurt you. The state doesn't need your permission to prosecute assault. The criminal case will move forward regardless of what you want. But the divorce is separate. And that's where Rebecca comes in." Thomas's expression hardened. Marcus built his fortune through careful manipulation and strategic cruelty. He's gotten away with it because he's smart enough to hide the worst of his behavior. Tonight, he made a mistake. He let everyone see who he really is. Sophia's phone, which had been blessedly silent in her purse, suddenly began buzzing with notifications. Text messages, emails, social media alerts, all flooding in at once. "Don't look at those," Thomas advised. "The press has the story now. It's going to be ugly for a while." But Sophia had already pulled out her phone, unable to resist the morbid curiosity. The first headline made her stomach turn: "Billionaire Marcus Hayes arrested after assaulting pregnant wife at charity gala." Another: "Wall Street darling charged with domestic violence." And another: "Senator Blake witnessed Hayes' assault, completely unprovoked." The photographs were worse. Someone had captured the moment of impact: Marcus's hand blurred with motion, Sophia's face twisted in shock and pain. The image was already going viral, shared thousands of times across social media with hashtags like #NoExcuse and #BelieveWomen. "He's going to hate this," Sophia said quietly, scrolling through the coverage. "His reputation is everything to him." "Good." Thomas's voice was hard. "He should hate it. He should feel every ounce of shame and humiliation he tried to inflict on you." A soft knock interrupted them. A nurse poked her head in, her expression apologetic. "I'm sorry to disturb you, but there are reporters outside asking for Mrs. Hayes." "Should I call security?" "Yes, please," Thomas said firmly. "And make sure they don't allow anyone except approved visitors to this floor." After the nurse left, Sophia lay back against her pillows, her hand resting on her belly where the baby had finally settled into sleep. "What happens now, Dad?" "Now we fight." Thomas pulled a chair closer to her bed. "Rebecca will file for divorce first thing Monday morning. She'll request an emergency restraining order prohibiting Marcus from contacting you or coming within 500 feet. We'll get you moved into my townhouse. Your old room is exactly as you left it. Marcus won't let me just leave. Marcus doesn't get a say." Thomas's voice was gentle but firm. "Sophia, I'm not just your father right now. I'm a criminal court judge who's seen hundreds of domestic violence cases. They all follow the same pattern. The abuse escalates. The abuser becomes more controlling, more violent. If you go back to him, he will hurt you again. And next time, he might hurt the baby." Sophia closed her eyes, tears leaking from beneath her lids. She'd known, somewhere deep inside, that her marriage was broken. But she'd convinced herself she could fix it, that if she just tried harder, was better, Marcus would become the man she'd fallen in love with. "He wasn't always like this," she whispered. "When we first met, he was charming and attentive. He made me feel special. That's how men like Marcus operate." Thomas's voice was sad but not judgmental. "They identify women who are kind and empathetic, women who want to see the best in people. They mirror what you want to see until you're committed. And then, slowly, the mask comes off." Sophia thought about the past 2 years, about the gradual erosion of her independence. Marcus suggesting she quit her job at the advocacy center, then sulking when she refused. Marcus criticizing her clothes, her friends, her hobbies. Marcus tracking her location through her phone, demanding detailed accounts of how she spent her time. Small things, she'd told herself. Quirks she could work around. But they'd been warnings she'd chosen to ignore. "I should have listened to you," she said. "You tried to tell me. You were in love. And you're an adult who gets to make her own choices." Thomas squeezed her hand gently. "The important thing is that you're making the right choice now. You're protecting yourself and your daughter." Sophia's phone buzzed again, this time with a call from an unknown number. Thomas reached over and declined it, then turned off the phone completely. "No more tonight," he said firmly. "Tonight, you rest. Tomorrow, we start planning. But tonight, you're safe, the baby is safe, and that's all that matters." But Sophia couldn't turn off her mind as easily as her phone. She kept replaying the moment in the alcove, the shock of Marcus's hand connecting with her face, the ringing silence that had followed. She kept seeing the calculation in his eyes as he'd realized what he'd done. And she kept wondering what he was doing right now. Was he in a holding cell, furious at being detained like a common criminal? Was he calling his lawyers, already constructing his defense? Was he planning how to punish her for the humiliation she'd caused him? "Dad," she said quietly. "Marcus is going to try to destroy me. His reputation is ruined now, and he'll blame me for it. He'll use everything he has against me. Let him try." Thomas's smile was cold. Marcus Hayes is about to discover that money and power mean very little in a criminal courtroom. And in divorce court, he's going to learn that assaulting your pregnant wife tends to cost you everything. But he has the best lawyers, so do you. Rebecca Morrison has been practicing family law for 30 years. She's seen every trick, every manipulation, every underhanded tactic men like Marcus employ. Thomas stood and adjusted Sophia's blanket, his movements gentle despite the fury in his eyes. "And she's particularly motivated in your case." "Why?" "Because 10 years ago, Marcus's first wife tried to leave him. She'd signed a prenup that gave her almost nothing, and Marcus used his wealth and connections to drag out the divorce for 3 years. By the end, she'd spent every cent she had on legal fees and settled for a fraction of what she deserved." Thomas's jaw tightened. Rebecca was her attorney. She's never forgotten how Marcus manipulated the system. Sophia felt a small spark of hope kindle in her chest. So she knows his tactics. She knows everything. Including things about Marcus's business practices that he'd very much prefer stayed hidden. Thomas's phone buzzed again, and this time he answered it. Judge Chen speaking. Sophia watched her father's face as he listened to whoever was on the other end. His expression shifted from neutral to satisfied to something approaching vindication. Thank you for calling, he said finally. Yes, I'll let her know. After hanging up, he turned to Sophia with the first genuine smile she'd seen from him all evening. That was Rebecca. She just got a call from the district attorney himself. Apparently, in the 3 hours since Marcus was arrested, they've received over 50 calls from people offering information about his business practices and personal conduct. 50 calls? Employees, former business partners, people he's wronged over the years. Thomas's smile widened. It seems Marcus has been making enemies as fast as he's been making money. And now that he's shown vulnerability, they're all coming forward. Sophia felt something shift inside her chest, like a weight she'd been carrying for years finally lifting. He's always so careful about his image. He must be losing his mind. Good. Thomas settled back into his chair. Let him lose his mind. Let him feel one fraction of the fear and humiliation he's inflicted on others. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, Sophia's exhaustion finally catching up with her. But just as she was drifting off, her father's phone rang again. It's Marcus's attorney, Thomas said, glancing at the caller ID. I'm going to take this outside. Try to rest. But Sophia was wide awake now, her heart pounding. Marcus had made bail, she'd known he would. Men like him always did. The question was what he'd do next. Thomas returned 5 minutes later, his expression grim. That was Lawrence Winters, Marcus's personal attorney. He wanted to inform us that Marcus has been released on bail and is requesting supervised visitation when the baby is born. Absolutely not. That's what I told him. Rebecca will file for full custody with supervised visits only after the baby is at least 6 months old. Thomas's voice was hard. But Sophia, we need to talk about something. Marcus is going to fight this. He's going to use every resource at his disposal to paint himself as the victim and you as unstable. How can he possibly? He'll claim the pregnancy made you emotionally volatile. He'll say he barely touched you, that witnesses exaggerated what they saw. He'll suggest you've been planning to divorce him all along and manufactured this incident to get favorable terms. Sophia felt sick. Will people believe that? Some will. Marcus has spent years building relationships with powerful people. Some of them will want to believe his version because it's more comfortable than accepting that they've been doing business with an abuser. Thomas took her hand again. But most won't. The witnesses tonight included some of the most credible people in New York. In the physical evidence, your injuries, the photographs, the medical records, all support your account. I'm scared, Dad. I know, sweetheart. But you're not alone. And you're stronger than you think. Sophia wanted to believe him. But as she finally drifted into an uneasy sleep, her dreams were filled with Marcus's cold eyes and calculating smile, planning his next move in a game she'd never wanted to play. The next morning, Sophia woke to find her father had already left for an emergency meeting with Rebecca Morrison. A note on her bedside table read, "Stay in the hospital until I return. Security has been notified not to let Marcus anywhere near you. Love, Dad." She was checking her phone, turned back on despite her better judgment, when Dr. Walsh appeared for morning rounds. "How are you feeling, Mrs. Hayes?" "Sophia, please." "And I'm okay." "Sore, but okay." Dr. Walsh's examination was thorough and gentle. "The bruising on your face will get worse before it gets better. I'm going to have a plastic surgeon consult, just to make sure there's no permanent damage. And I want you to follow up with a therapist who specializes in domestic violence trauma." "I don't need a therapist, Sophia." Dr. Walsh's voice was kind but firm. You were assaulted by someone you trusted. You're 7 months pregnant. Your body is already under stress from the pregnancy, and now it's dealing with trauma as well. A therapist isn't a luxury. It's a necessity. After Dr. Walsh left, Sophia finally allowed herself to look at the full extent of the media coverage. It was worse than she'd imagined. Her face was everywhere, the moment of impact, her split lip, the shock in her eyes. Photographers had captured Marcus being led away in handcuffs, his expression furious and disbelieving. The comments sections were brutal in their judgment of Marcus, but also invasive in their speculation about Sophia. People she'd never met were discussing her marriage, her choices, her appearance. Strangers were offering opinions on whether she should press charges, whether she should divorce him, whether she'd provoked the attack. She was about to put the phone away when a particular headline caught her eye. Marcus Hayes' first wife breaks silence. He made my life hell. Sophia clicked on the article with shaking hands. Catherine Reed, now 42, was married to billionaire Marcus Hayes for 18 months a decade ago. In an exclusive interview, Reed describes a relationship that started with charm and ended in terror. Marcus was wonderful at first, Reed said. Attentive, generous, everything I'd ever wanted. But the moment we got married, everything changed. He became controlling, verbally abusive, and eventually physically violent. Reed, who signed a non-disclosure agreement as part of her divorce settlement, says she's breaking her silence now because she can't stay quiet while another woman suffers what she endured. I saw what happened at that gala, Reed said. I saw Marcus hit his pregnant wife, and I knew I had to speak out. I don't care if he sues me for breaking the NDA. Some things are more important than money. Reed describes a pattern of escalating abuse during her marriage to Hayes, including being locked out of their apartment, having her credit cards canceled without warning, and being isolated from friends and family. The physical abuse started about 6 months into our marriage, Reed said. Marcus pushed me during an argument, then apologized profusely. He bought me expensive jewelry, promised it would never happen again. But it did. It always does with men like him. Reed eventually left Hayes after he threatened her during an argument about having children. He told me if I ever got pregnant, he'd make sure I lost custody. That I'd never see my child. I realized then that I had to get out before it was too late. The subsequent divorce was brutal, with Hayes using his wealth and connections to drag out proceedings for 3 years. Reed eventually settled for a fraction of what she deserved, bound by an NDA that prohibited her from discussing the marriage. I let him silence me once, Reed said. I won't let him silence me again. Sophia Hayes deserves to know she's not alone, that this isn't her fault, and that there's life after Marcus Hayes. Sophia read the article 3 times, tears streaming down her face. She wasn't the first. Marcus had done this before, perfected his tactics on another woman who'd loved and trusted him. Her phone rang with a call from Rebecca Morrison. Sophia, it's Rebecca. Have you seen the article about Catherine Reed? I just finished reading it. Good. Because she's given us a gift. Her testimony about the pattern of abuse, combined with Marcus's arrest last night, completely destroys any defense he might have mounted. Rebecca's voice was crisp and professional. I'm filing for divorce this afternoon. Emergency custody, full asset disclosure, restraining order, the works. What about the NDA she signed? Marcus's attorneys will argue she violated it by speaking to the press. But there's a legal principle called the crime-fraud exception. If an agreement was made to cover up criminal activity or ongoing harm, it's not enforceable. Rebecca sounded satisfied. An assault of a pregnant woman is definitely criminal activity. What happens now? Now we go on the offensive. I'm scheduling a press conference for tomorrow afternoon. You, me, and Catherine Reed. We're going to tell your story, establish the narrative before Marcus's PR team can spin it. Rebecca paused. Are you comfortable with that? Sophia thought about the photographs already circulating, about strangers dissecting her life. Going public felt terrifying, but staying silent felt worse. Yes, she said firmly. I'll do it. After hanging up, Sophia looked at her reflection in the hospital bathroom mirror. The bruise on her face had deepened to purple, her split lips swollen and painful. She looked like a victim, fragile and broken. But beneath the injuries, she saw something else. The same determination that had gotten her through law school, that had driven her to fight for children who had no one else to advocate for them. Marcus had hit her, humiliated her, tried to break her. He'd failed. Her father returned an hour later with clothes, toiletries, and news. Rebecca's filed the divorce papers, he said. Marcus was served at his attorney's office 30 minutes ago. And the restraining order has been approved. He can't come within 500 feet of you. How did he react? According to Rebecca's paralegal who was present for the service, he threw the papers across the room and started screaming about how you'd regret this. Thomas's expression was grim. His attorney had to physically restrain him from leaving to come find you. Sophia felt ice settle in her stomach. He's going to escalate, isn't he? Probably. But that's why we're getting ahead of this. The press conference tomorrow, the criminal charges, the divorce filing, we're taking away his power to control the narrative. What about his business? Won't this affect Hayes Capital? It already has. The stock price dropped 15% this morning when trading opened. 3 major clients have pulled their accounts. And the SEC has announced an investigation into some of Hayes Capital's investment practices. Thomas's smile was cold. Marcus built his empire on his reputation for control and success. That reputation is currently burning to the ground. Sophia should have felt triumphant. Instead, she felt exhausted and sad. This was the father of her child, the man she'd planned to spend her life with. Watching him destroyed should have been satisfying, but it just felt tragic. Plead guilty to a lesser charge. Assault in the 3rd degree, anger management classes, probation. In the divorce, offer Sophia generous terms, full custody with liberal visitation, substantial child support, a fair division of assets. Show remorse, take responsibility, move forward with your life. Marcus laughed, the sound bitter and harsh. You want me to admit I'm an abuser? To give Sophia everything she wants? That's not happening, Lawrence. Then prepare for a very public trial where every mistake you've ever made will be dissected in front of cameras. Lawrence's voice was cold. Because that's what's coming, Marcus. The district attorney is politically ambitious. Your case is high profile, with multiple credible witnesses and clear evidence. She's going to throw everything she has at you. I have resources, so does Sophia. Her father is one of the most respected judges in Manhattan. Her attorney is Rebecca Morrison, who already hates you from your first divorce. And public opinion is completely against you. Lawrence leaned forward. Marcus, you can't money or influence your way out of this. The best you can hope for is to minimize the damage. But Marcus wasn't listening. His mind was already racing through possibilities, strategies, ways to turn this situation to his advantage. Sophia thought she'd won by going public, by painting herself as a victim. But victims were weak, and weakness could be exploited. I want a full investigation into Sophia's background, he said abruptly. Her work at the Children's Advocacy Center, her finances, her relationships before we met. Everything. Marcus, digging up dirt on your pregnant wife is not a good look. I don't care about looks. I care about leverage. Marcus's smile was cold. Sophia wants to play games with the press? Fine. We'll play games. But she's about to learn that I'm much better at this than she is. After leaving Lawrence's office, Marcus drove to the penthouse apartment he'd shared with Sophia for 3 years. The building's doorman nodded nervously as Marcus entered, clearly aware of the news coverage and unsure how to react. The apartment felt empty without Sophia's presence. Her paintings were still on the walls, her books on the shelves, her piano in the corner. Evidence of a life they'd shared, now reduced to assets to be divided in divorce court. Marcus poured himself scotch, 30-year-old Macallan that cost more per bottle than most people earned in a week, and stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. From this height, the people below looked like insects, tiny and insignificant. That was how Marcus had always viewed the world. From above. Superior. In control. Sophia had changed that. She'd made him feel vulnerable, exposed, powerless. And he hated her for it. His phone rang with a call from his publicist, Amanda Chen. No relation to Sophia, she'd been quick to clarify when the news broke. "Marcus, we need to do damage control immediately," Amanda said without preamble. "I've had 3 major networks call asking for interviews. We need to get ahead of this narrative." "What narrative?" "The one where you're a violent abuser who beats his pregnant wife. We need to humanize you, show your side of the story." Amanda's voice was professional, clinical. "I'm thinking an interview with someone sympathetic. Maybe Anderson Cooper? We can talk about the pressures of building a billion-dollar company, about how the incident was a moment of weakness you deeply regret." "I don't regret it." The silence on the other end was profound. "Marcus, you need to at least pretend to regret it. Public perception can go to hell. I'm not going to grovel and apologize for something that was blown completely out of proportion." Marcus's voice was hard. "Sophia wants a war? She'll get one. Marcus, listen to me very carefully. You cannot win a PR war against a pregnant woman who you publicly assaulted. It's impossible. The best you can do is show remorse and hope people eventually forgive you." Amanda's frustration was evident. "If you fight this, you'll lose everything." "I've already lost everything." Marcus ended the call and threw his phone across the room, satisfaction flooding through him as it shattered against the wall. Everything he'd built, Hayes Capital, his reputation, his position in society, was crumbling because of one moment of lost control. One slap that hundreds of people had witnessed and would never let him forget. But Marcus Hayes hadn't become a billionaire by giving up when things got difficult. He'd clawed his way up from a middle-class background in New Jersey, fighting and manipulating and outworking everyone around him. He'd destroyed competitors, ruined partnerships, done whatever was necessary to win. Sophia thought her father's judicial connections and her attorney's reputation would protect her. But she'd forgotten something crucial: Marcus Hayes always won. Always. He just needed to find her weakness. And he thought he knew exactly where to look. Sophia's work at the Children's Advocacy Center had always been her passion, the one thing in her life that Marcus couldn't touch or control. She'd poured herself into helping abused children, sometimes staying late into the night to finish case files, sometimes breaking down in tears over children she couldn't save. That passion was admirable. It was also a vulnerability. Because if Marcus could prove that Sophia's emotional investment in her work had made her unstable, if he could show that she'd brought that instability into their marriage, if he could paint a picture of a woman so consumed by trauma and other people's pain that she'd fabricated abuse in her own life, the narrative practically wrote itself. Marcus picked up his laptop and began composing an email to a private investigator he'd used before. Someone discreet, someone willing to dig deep and find whatever needed to be found. "The first time Marcus hit me, he apologized profusely," Catherine said, her voice steady but sad. "He bought me a diamond bracelet and swore it would never happen again. I wanted to believe him. So I stayed." "How many times did the physical abuse occur?" Jessica asked. 7 times over the course of a year. Each time, he apologized. Each time, he bought expensive gifts. Each time, he promised to change." Catherine looked directly at the jury. "But men who hit their wives don't change through apologies and presents. They change when they face real consequences." Lawrence tried to discredit Catherine, pointing out that she'd signed an NDA prohibiting her from discussing the marriage. But Jessica was ready with case law establishing that NDAs covering criminal activity weren't enforceable. "Mrs. Reed isn't violating a legal agreement," Jessica argued. "She's testifying truthfully about criminal conduct. The law protects whistleblowers, Your Honor." Judge Morrison agreed, allowing Catherine's full testimony. When it was Sophia's turn to take the stand, she walked to the witness box with her head high despite the trembling in her hands. She'd waited weeks for this moment, the chance to tell her truth directly to the jury, unfiltered by media reports or legal filings. Jessica took her through the events of the gala carefully, establishing timeline and context. Sophia described her conversation with Senator Blake, Marcus's growing anger, the moment in the alcove when everything changed. "What did Marcus say to you immediately before the assault?" Jessica asked. "He said my work at the Children's Advocacy Center didn't matter. That I'd embarrassed him in front of people who controlled billion-dollar funds. That I'd ruined everything." Sophia's voice was steady, years of courtroom advocacy training serving her well. "Then he grabbed my wrist hard enough to bruise and told me I was failing as his wife." "What happened next?" "I tried to pull away. I told him he was hurting me." Sophia met the jury's eyes. "And then he slapped me across the face hard enough that I tasted blood immediately." "Had your husband ever struck you before that night?" "No. But he'd grabbed me, pushed me, backed me into corners during arguments. Always followed by apologies and expensive gifts." Sophia's hands clenched in her lap. "I can see now that the violence was escalating. The gala was just the first time he did it where other people could see." Lawrence's cross-examination was brutal. He questioned Sophia about her work at the center, suggesting she'd become too emotionally involved with cases. He asked about her pregnancy hormones, about her emotional state, about whether she'd been sleeping well. "Mrs. Hayes, isn't it true that you told your therapist you'd been feeling overwhelmed and anxious in the weeks before the gala?" Sophia felt anger flash through her. Marcus's investigators had somehow obtained her therapy records, another illegal invasion of privacy that would result in more sanctions against him. "I was overwhelmed," she admitted. "I was 7 months pregnant, working full-time, and married to a man who made me feel like I was never good enough. Yes, I was anxious. Anxious enough that you might have misinterpreted a gentle touch as assault. No amount of anxiety makes you imagine being hit hard enough to split your lip." Sophia's voice was hard. 300 people witnessed the assault, Mr. Winters. You can't gaslight me into believing it didn't happen when there are photographs of the moment of impact." The jury's reaction was visible, several members nodding in agreement, one woman dabbing at her eyes with a tissue. Lawrence pressed on, but Sophia didn't waver. Every question he asked, she answered with calm precision. Every attempt to paint her as unstable or vindictive, she deflected with facts and evidence. By the time she left the stand, Sophia could see the doubt in Lawrence's expression. His defense strategy wasn't working. The jury believed her. Marcus testified in his own defense, against Lawrence's obvious advice. He claimed the contact had been accidental, that he'd reached to steady Sophia when she stumbled and accidentally struck her face. "I would never intentionally hurt my wife," Marcus said, his expression earnest. "I love Sophia. I was devastated when I realized my attempt to help her had resulted in injury." But on cross-examination, Jessica destroyed him. "Mr. Hayes, you testified that you reached out to steady your wife when she stumbled?" "Yes. But security camera footage from the plaza shows Mrs. Hayes standing still when you struck her. She didn't stumble until after the assault." Jessica pulled up the video, playing it for the jury. "Would you like to revise your testimony?" Marcus's face flushed. "The angle of the camera is misleading. The angle shows your right hand making contact with the left side of Mrs. Hayes's face with enough force to move her head several inches. That's not steadying someone. That's assault." Jessica played the video again, this time in slow motion. The jury watched intently as Marcus's hand connected with Sophia's face, as her head snapped to the side, as she stumbled backward. "Mr. Hayes, do you still claim this was an accident?" Marcus's jaw clenched. For a moment, Sophia thought he might admit the truth. But his pride wouldn't allow it. "It was a misunderstanding that's been blown completely out of proportion by my wife's attorneys. A misunderstanding that resulted in a split lip, substantial bruising, and trauma severe enough that Mrs. Hayes required medical monitoring to ensure the baby's safety." Sophia is prone to emotional exaggeration, is Senator Blake prone to emotional exaggeration? Is he imagining what he witnessed? Senator Blake saw what Sophia wanted him to see. Mr. Hayes, are you seriously suggesting that your wife staged an assault in front of 300 witnesses, including a United States senator, just to gain leverage in a divorce? Jessica's voice was incredulous. Do you understand how absurd that sounds? The jury clearly agreed with Jessica. Several were shaking their heads. One man was openly scowling at Marcus. The trial lasted 2 weeks, but the verdict took the jury less than 3 hours to reach. Guilty on all counts: assault in the second degree, reckless endangerment of a child. Judge Morrison scheduled sentencing for the following week, and Sophia knew Marcus would face serious prison time. The guidelines called for 2 to 7 years, and given his complete lack of remorse and his continued harassment of Sophia throughout the proceedings, he'd likely receive something toward the higher end. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed around Sophia and Rebecca. Questions flew from every direction, but Sophia held up a hand for silence. I want to thank the jury for their service and their attention to the evidence, she said, her voice steady despite the cameras and microphones thrust toward her. I want to thank ADA Martinez for her tireless work prosecuting this case. And I want to thank Judge Morrison for ensuring this trial was fair and thorough. Mrs. Hayes, how do you feel about your husband's conviction? A reporter called out. Marcus Hayes is not my husband. Our divorce was finalized last week. As for the conviction, I feel that justice has been served. I hope this case sends a message that domestic violence will not be tolerated, regardless of the abuser's wealth or social position. What about your daughter? Will you allow Marcus to have a relationship with her? Sophia's hand went instinctively to where Grace slept in a carrier against her chest, Thomas standing protectively beside them both. That decision will be made based on what's best for Grace's safety and well-being. Right now, Marcus Hayes is facing prison time for assaulting her mother. Until he demonstrates genuine change and completes extensive treatment for his violent behavior, I won't expose my daughter to him. Some people say you used the legal system to punish your ex-husband for divorcing you. How do you respond? Sophia felt anger flash through her, but kept her voice level. Marcus didn't divorce me. I divorced him after he assaulted me. And I didn't use the legal system to punish anyone. I used it to seek justice for a crime that was witnessed by hundreds of people and documented in photographs and video. Those aren't my claims, those are facts. Rebecca stepped forward then, ending the press conference. That's all for today. Mrs. Chen needs to get home to her newborn daughter. In the car driving back to Thomas's townhouse, Sophia finally allowed herself to break down. She'd held it together through weeks of testimony, through watching Marcus lie on the stand, through the stress of wondering if the jury would actually convict him. Now, with Grace sleeping peacefully against her chest and her father driving them home, she let the tears come. It's over, she whispered. It's really over. Not quite yet, Thomas said gently. There's still sentencing. But yes, sweetheart, the hardest part is over. You won. But Sophia didn't feel like she'd won. She felt exhausted, sad, and keenly aware that Grace would grow up asking questions about her father, questions Sophia would have to answer honestly but carefully. What do I tell her? Sophia asked. When she's old enough to ask why her father isn't in her life, what do I say? You tell her the truth. That her father made bad choices that hurt people. That you loved her enough to protect her from those choices. That she's loved and wanted and safe. Thomas glanced at her in the rearview mirror. And you tell her that her grandfather will always be there for her, along with everyone else who loves her. Sentencing day arrived with unseasonable warmth for late November. Sophia sat in the gallery holding Grace, who was now 3 weeks old and beginning to focus on faces and voices. Thomas sat beside them, his hand resting protectively on Sophia's shoulder. Marcus was led into the courtroom in handcuffs, his expensive suit rumpled from weeks in jail. He looked thinner, older, the arrogance that had defined him replaced by barely suppressed rage. Judge Morrison reviewed the pre-sentence report, her expression growing increasingly stern. Mr. Hayes, you've shown no remorse for your actions. You've continued to harass the victim throughout these proceedings. You've violated court orders repeatedly. You've attempted to intimidate witnesses and corrupt the legal process. She set down the report and looked at Marcus directly. I've presided over hundreds of assault cases during my career. I've seen truly remorseful defendants who made terrible mistakes and worked hard to change. You are not one of those defendants. Your Honor, if I may, Lawrence Winters attempted to interject. You may not. Judge Morrison's voice was ice. Mr. Hayes, you are sentenced to the maximum term allowed under the guidelines, 7 years in state prison. You will also be required to complete a certified batterer intervention program and anger management treatment. You are prohibited from any contact with the victim or her daughter except through court-approved supervised visitation, which will not be considered until you've served at least 4 years of your sentence and completed all required treatment. Marcus shot to his feet, his face purple with rage. This is insane. 7 years for one slap? You're destroying my life over a minor incident. You destroyed your own life when you chose to assault your pregnant wife in front of 300 witnesses. Judge Morrison's voice cracked like a whip. Bailiff, remove the defendant. As Marcus was led away, he turned back to look at Sophia one last time. The hatred in his eyes was absolute, but beneath it, she saw something else, the dawning realization that he'd lost everything. His company. His reputation. His freedom. His daughter. All because he couldn't control his temper for 5 seconds at a charity gala. Outside the courthouse, the press was waiting again. This time, Sophia had prepared a statement. Today, justice was served. Marcus Hayes will spend the next 7 years in prison for assaulting me while I was 7 months pregnant with our daughter. I hope this sentence sends a message to other abusers that wealth and privilege will not protect you from consequences. Mrs. Chen, do you have any message for domestic violence survivors watching this case? Sophia looked directly into the cameras. You are not alone. You are not crazy. If someone who claims to love you hurts you, that is their fault, not yours. And there are people who will believe you, who will help you, who will stand beside you while you fight for justice. She adjusted Grace in her arms, the baby's weight grounding her. It took me too long to recognize that I was in an abusive relationship. I made excuses for Marcus's controlling behavior because I loved him. But love doesn't excuse violence. Love doesn't mean accepting abuse. Real love is what my father showed me, protecting me, believing me, standing by me even when I'd made mistakes. What's next for you? I'm going back to work at the Children's Advocacy Center. I'm raising my daughter to be strong and independent. And I'm living my life without fear. Sophia smiled, the expression genuine for the first time in months. Marcus Hayes tried to break me. He failed. And I want every woman in a similar situation to know that they're stronger than they think, braver than they believe, and capable of surviving and thriving after abuse. 6 months later, Sophia sat in her new apartment, a sunny 2-bedroom in Brooklyn that Thomas had helped her find, watching Grace attempt to roll over on her play mat. The baby was growing fast, her dark eyes curious and alert, her smile capable of lighting up rooms. The divorce settlement had been finalized, giving Sophia full custody and a substantial portion of the marital assets. What remained of Hayes Capital after its bankruptcy had been liquidated, with Sophia receiving several $1 million from the proceeds. It was enough to ensure Grace would never want for anything, enough to let Sophia choose work based on passion rather than necessity. She'd return to the Children's Advocacy Center part-time, finding that her own experience with abuse made her more effective in helping child victims. She understood trauma in ways she hadn't before, understood how abusers operated, understood the courage it took to speak truth to power. Rebecca Morrison had become a close friend, often stopping by with dinner or offers to babysit so Sophia could have an evening to herself. Catherine Reed kept in touch as well, their shared experience creating a bond that transcended the years and miles between them. And Thomas, Judge Thomas Chen, was exactly the grandfather Grace needed. Patient, loving, fiercely protective, spending every weekend with his granddaughter and teaching Sophia that being a single mother didn't mean being alone. Marcus's first letter arrived from prison 3 months into his sentence. Sophia almost threw it away unopened, but curiosity got the better of her. The letter was brief. Sophia, I've had a lot of time to think about what I did and why I did it. The anger management program here has helped me understand that I was trying to control you because I was terrified of losing you, of not being good enough, of failing. That doesn't excuse hitting you. Nothing excuses that. But I want you to know that I'm working on changing, on becoming someone our daughter could be proud of someday. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't deserve it. But I hope that when Grace is old enough to ask about me, you'll tell her I'm trying to be better. Marcus. Sophia read the letter twice, trying to determine if the remorse was genuine or another manipulation. In the end, she decided it didn't matter. Marcus's journey toward change, if real, was his own responsibility, not hers. She drafted a brief response. Marcus, I received your letter. I'm glad you're getting treatment and working on understanding your behavior. As for Grace, when she's old enough to ask about you, I'll tell her the truth. That you were brilliant and ambitious, that you built an impressive company, and that you made terrible choices that hurt people you claim to love. I'll tell her that you're in prison because you assaulted her mother, and that actions have consequences. If you genuinely change, if you complete treatment and demonstrate sustained nonviolence, we can discuss supervised visitation when Grace is older and able to understand the situation. But that's years away, and it's contingent on proof of real change, not just words in a letter. I wish you well in your journey toward becoming a better person. But that journey is yours to take, not mine to facilitate. Sophia. She sealed the letter and mailed it, then put Marcus out of her mind. He was her past. Grace was her future. That evening, as Sophia rocked Grace to sleep, she thought about how much her life had changed in less than a year. From the woman who'd stood in that alcove at the Plaza Hotel, shocked and hurting, to the woman she was now, stronger, wiser, more certain of her worth. Marcus had tried to break her. Instead, he'd awakened something fierce and powerful that had been sleeping inside her all along. She was Sophia Chen, attorney, advocate, survivor, mother. She was the daughter of one of Manhattan's toughest judges, the friend of women who'd survived similar battles, the voice for children who needed protection. And she was free. Grace stirred in her arms, making small sleeping sounds. Sophia kissed her daughter's forehead and whispered the promise she made every night: you'll never doubt your worth, baby girl. You'll never question whether you deserve to be treated with respect and kindness. You'll never stay with someone who hurts you because you'll know from watching me that we're strong enough to walk away. Outside the apartment windows, Brooklyn sparkled with evening lights. The city that had witnessed her humiliation had also witnessed her triumph, her refusal to be silenced or shamed. Marcus Hayes had learned the most expensive lesson of his life, that wealth and power meant nothing against a woman who refused to be broken. And Sophia Chen had learned something equally valuable, that she'd always been stronger than she knew, braver than she believed, and capable of surviving anything. Even a billionaire's attempt to destroy her. The end came not with dramatic confrontation, but with quiet dignity and the sound of her daughter's laughter echoing through their home.